everyone, and thanks for listening to the She Slays the Day podcast. I'm your host, Lauryn Brunswick. Who the heck else would be introducing an episode except for me? That'd be weird. So today, I'm a little excited about this interview that I got to do. So we have Brit Barron on. For those that have never heard of this very, very cool woman, you should run and grab her book that just released this week called Worth It. So background on how we got to do this interview, because she's kind of a big deal. Kirby and I were at an Amy Porterfield conference last October. And I didn't know who she was, but she was like the MC for the event. And she's really funny. Kirby loves himself some stand-up comedy, so he appreciates anybody standing on a stage and telling jokes. And so he was smitten with her right from the get-go. And she started sharing a little bit of her story, just kind of in her MC work, and we liked her a lot. And we were actually with Dr. Christy Wick and her husband, and I was like, "Who is this chick?" And Christy's like, This is Beans. You don't know who Beans is? I'm like, no, who? And she's like, oh, she's like Rachel Hollis's best friend. She's like, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, never heard of her. So after the conference, which was awesome, we were kind of hanging out at the conference center, like around a patio. And we saw Beans and her girlfriend sitting and waiting for food by the campfire, or like by one of the little fires on the patio. And I said to Kirby, I was like, there she is. Let's go talk to her. And Kirby's like, no, we should leave her alone, because he's a 9 and he believes in not disturbing other people's harmony. And I'm a 3, and 3s see cool people and go, I want to be friends with them. Let's go talk to them. So anyway, so we totally crashed their conversation and ended up talking to him for like an hour. We talked about spirituality. We talked about the Eau Claire's Festival, which is a festival here in Wisconsin by Grammy artist Bon Iver. Like, just so many cool things. And so then when a couple months later, we saw that she had a book coming out. Well, she was actually talking to us about the book that night. So then as it got closer to her book release, we just reached out and said, would you come on our podcast, please? And she said yes. So there you go. Now you know everything about the background, how I am that cool that I got somebody so cool on the podcast. So anyways, check out her book, Worth It. It just released this past week. You can get it where all people get books, but it is a story about overcoming fear. She'll talk in the interview about her very unique story. So basically, she spent the first part of her life in like a mega evangelical church, and she became a pastor there really young, only at 26. And these are her words. She said she peaked too soon. So after peaking too soon, she started to understand more about herself and her dreams and her sexuality. So she met a woman named Sammy that changed and saved and transformed her whole life, like both of them. So meeting Sammy, leaving the church, coming out, and getting married has given Brit a deep-seated passion for reminding people that choosing freedom is always worth it, no matter the cost. So again, her story is so cool. She's so down to earth, and I think you're going to love her. Before we jump in, I don't need to pray because she's a pastor. I made her pray. Wasn't that nice of me to have a big deal guest on and then be like, we pray before we podcast? So no, she did a great job. So I'm not going to pray, but before we jump in, I will read you a little listener highlight here. So this one comes from H.J. Burhans, and it says, I'm currently listening to the 7 Steps of Ego right now. All your episodes are amazing, but that one was a much needed listen today. So if you haven't gone back and listened to that one, that was a fun one for me. As thanks for sending me that, H.J. Burhans, by the way. I appreciate you guys' messages and stuff. Like I said, when I'm having like a bum day and patients are pissing me off, it's nice to just go on Instagram and I'm like, oh, there's a little DM and it's just somebody nice and it's so helpful. So I appreciate them. But no, I really liked doing that episode also. I find that I am really finding my voice and platform that I like talking on, where I feel like I can be extra vulnerable with you guys. And I've never tried to hide that ego is something that I've had to work to overcome a lot of, and it is so much better on the other side of ego. So yeah, that was a great episode. So if you haven't listened to that one, I highly encourage going and listening to that one because I liked it. So without further ado, here is my interview with an amazing book author and pastor, Brit Barron. Okay, well, everyone, you listened to the intro, so you know I'm a tiny bit excited about today's guest. I would love to say that I got all my fangirling over with, but I didn't. So you might say, I'm sorry. But today we have Brit Barron on the show. Welcome, Brit.
Yes. Hello. Excited to be here.
So before we really jump into your book and all the topics surrounding that, I would love if you would, since you're a pastor, open us, instead of me praying, I would love if you would be willing to just say a little prayer over the episode. That would be great.
Amazing. So it's going to be just a little prayer. We'll probably go 30 or 40 minutes. Just kidding. God, thank you so much that we don't have to invite you anywhere, but that you are everywhere and always. And that means in this conversation with us right now, that means with everyone who is listening. And so just remind us of that presence, and remind us of opportunities to still ourselves and to reconnect. We love you. Amen.
Thank you. So I started praying before episodes with our very first episode because I am such a I don't spend too much time making sure that questions or things I'm about to say are eloquent, but my heart is so good. And so it's always this, please, God, help people learn to interpret this mouth that you've given me. And this, help people know I have a good heart.
Yes, God, help this podcast.
Help me.
Help Jesus.
Okay, so Brit, you have written a book.
I wrote a book.
So you're an Enneagram 7.
I am, yes.
Did you get tricked into the idea of writing a book because it sounded fun?
Yes. And okay, so are you an Enneagram 7?
I'm a 3, but
You're 3,
I
of course.
strongly identify as a 7.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
there's a lot of overlap.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not really from 7 to 3, but from 3 to 7.
Well, you get enticed by the dangly carrot of what next?
Yes, totally.
And the I don't really want to have feelings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's just keep it moving.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so actually, I have wanted to write a book since I was probably 15 or 16.
Really?
And I wanted to be a writer, and there is something, I've since come to learn more about myself, and so what I want to be has shifted. But yeah, I just always admired people who were writers, and they would go away for 3 months and come back with what God had placed on their work in the world. Yeah,
this is my life's work.
Yeah, this is it. And I probably, not with a publisher or anything like that. This book came out of a very different set of circumstances. Mm-hmm. But previous to that, I had probably started and tried to write 4 or 5 books, just on my own, been mm-hmm. I'm going to write, but I obviously never finished them because there was no deadline, no incentive, and that's an Enneagram 7.
Yep. I need that deadline. Yeah. I need that push.
Yeah. I need someone being if you don't do this, you
have to give me that money back.
Yeah. We'll sue you or something. Yeah. I'm okay, it'll be done. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely, it's been something I've wanted to do forever. And I I can't believe just 2 days ago, the author copies got to my house. Maybe it was yesterday. I don't remember. And it's crazy. Like all day yesterday, I just was like carrying it around, like making breakfast. It was like under my arm. Like it's so exciting.
I did this.
So, yeah.
I did this thing.
Like this is mine. That's me.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. So you said you had started 4 or 5 books. So walk us up through like your journey, like who you are and how you came to writing and being inspired to finish this book.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, if I'm being honest, I feel like the 4 or 5 books that I started and stopped, looking back, I'm like, I'm not going to say I didn't have anything to say or I didn't have a story to tell, but I certainly didn't know myself well enough to get to the bottom of any critical point, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so that ties into a large part of my journey and what this book is a little bit about, which is, so I grew up in the evangelical church in the 90s, like at its peak, you know, and my dad was, both my parents were in ministry, and that just was what our life was about. And there are a lot of truly phenomenal and incredible experiences I've had because of that. And then there were some really sort of painful and hard things about that. So I went through church as a kid, high school, you know, and then went to a Christian college. So like just really committed. I was like, I'm doing this, but I'm going to do it. I'm going all the way. And any Enneagram 7 in a evangelical context, people say like, you're called to be a pastor because you're just like to talk and you can, and then people, you know, you have like a little bit of a personality and someone's like, you are called to be a pastor.
Yep. This sounds fun.
Yeah. So I was like, okay. So then I was an RD at a Christian college after that. And then left and had the opportunity to go and be a pastor at this mega church in near where we live now, actually. And it was such a fascinating thing because I was 26 years old at the time. And I was like, I have arrived. Like I literally have peaked. This context that I grew up in, like the highest goal you can achieve is like mega church pastor. Mm-hmm. So I was like, wow, at the ripe age of 26, God saw fit to give me I'm just here. Like, what do I
should write a
next?
book about this.
Yes. What am I going to be, the pastor on Mars? Like, I just have like, yeah. So it was in my first year at that job, actually, that I met my now wife. And I met her and I was like, wow. Like, I mean, we had a 4-hour coffee date and I left and I was like, that's my new best friend. Like for sure, that's my best friend in the entire world. I just met her. We're going to be friends forever. And we developed this very close friendship very, very quickly. And then realized like, oh my God, I'm in love with this person. And that does not go with my plan. And that is definitely going to mess up this entire situation. And so
now you had no idea or like up until that point that you might be gay.
You know, well, hindsight is 20/20.
Hindsight, yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Like looking back, I'm like, oh God, yes, the Birkenstocks, the field hockey camp. It was all there. But, and you know, working this out with my therapist for years, but there was, and I always joke that church was the best place to be closeted because I would say like, I don't even feel tempted to have sex with my boyfriends. And then people would say like, oh my gosh, great job. Like, and I literally for a while thought like, am I just so holy that I don't even want that? Like, yeah, like God has just blessed me with this willpower. and that's, you know, like looking back, I'm like, duh, you know?
And was this experience the same for Sammy? Like when you two met that like up until then, she really hadn't even thought that.
Yeah. So we were both sort of each other's like first, which is like such a special thing to me. I always say, and it's in the dedication of my book, she was the mirror I needed to see myself. And she just opened up something in me that, I mean, I'll be eternally grateful for. Right. And so we've been on a journey. And
you have this like, oh shit, we love each other. Now what?
Yeah. So, and if you can, I mean, you can't imagine, right? Cause you know this world. It wasn't just my job. It was
identity.
My friends, my identity, people like family. It was my career path. It was my calling. It had all of these things was tied into the reality of like, if this is true about me, then all of those things that I know would no longer be true about me. And I don't know if I am a strong enough person to actually like experience that. Mm-hmm. A lot of things in my life had felt buffered in a way. The church had always provided this, like almost like a bounty house. Like you know, there's always some kind of support system or net or that security and that comfort of those beliefs and ideals and that sense of belonging. And I literally collapsed at like the idea of living life and wondering what it would be like without that. And not only not having that, but having the opposite now, like having that same support system sort of say like, you're wrong. You're not, you know, you're bad. Like, this is not what's going to happen. And I struggled, like poor Sammy, like she's such a badass. And like, honestly, she was like, I love you. And like, if they don't like it, like it was so quick for her. Like she just like came into herself so quickly in our journey. And I just was like, I mean, gripping the closet with like white knuckles, like,
well, that's where, I mean, looking back, if it would have been easy, if you would have just, because I'm just, you know, I don't have your book yet because you just got your book, but awaiting it in the mail. And so like the book is about overcoming fear.
Yeah.
Right. So like if it had been just like quick, and I feel like we're both kind of, this is such a 3 and 7 thing to like, just kind of like minimize Sammy, like, oh, it was easy for her. Like she's
I know,
like, okay, it wasn't easy. Time out, guys.
I know. She's like, that was really hard. It was just faster than you. So I'm like, she didn't even think twice.
No, she was just easy.
That's so real.
If it would have been, air quotes, as easy for you, there probably wouldn't have been the piece of art that you created, right? Like in this book.
Yeah.
You know, there's not much story or depth to overcoming fear if you didn't have to process that and be afraid for a long time. You know, there's not a book of like, yeah, it was kind of scary, but then I just did it. Like,
yeah, it's 4 pages. Book.
Hope you love my book.
And that's so true. And to be honest, I think that's why I had started like 5 books before and couldn't finish them, because I didn't have that. I wasn't in touch with those experiences in my life. Right. I did a very 7 thing. Not that nothing had been hard in my life up to that point, but I had very Enneagram 7 did of like, oh, that was hard, but it was fine. You know? And this definitely pushed all of those boundaries. And the thing that eventually led to me writing about it in the way I hope I wrote about it is that lots of things in between. That's like a 3-year journey right there. But we finally got to this place and we came out, you know, coming out is such a funny thing. Cause it's like, make a list of people. Like I literally had a list. I still have it. I kept it. And it was like who I want to tell in person, people I can tell on the phone, text message, and then everyone else finds out on the internet. So it was like this, like layers. And so we had gotten to the place where we had told everyone on the internet. So now everyone knew. And some of the most supportive and touching messages that I got were from people who had been divorced, or like a pastor of our old church whose daughter got pregnant when she was in high school. And they were these like I was expecting myself to get these stories from other people who had come out, and I did, and it was fantastic. But that's when I realized, like, oh my gosh, we're not the only people with a decision to make about what happens when your life takes you outside of the comfort of your own community. Yeah. So when you make a decision, when you realize something is true about yourself, when you go after a goal, when you whatever, and there are people in your life who that's not comfortable for, we're having a similar experience. And I think that's where I wanted the book to land, was this idea of, okay, it's really hard to live your entire life based on other people's expectations of you. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard to live a life that breaks through those expectations and is true to who you want to be. They're both hard, but one of them, right, is worth it. And thinking through that and having conversations with people of like, oh my gosh, like, this isn't just me. Mm-hmm. And it's not even just gay people from the church. It's like everyone who is hindering and halting their own identity and their own development, and their own goals and dreams and hopes, because they don't want to disrupt that circle that's around them.
Well, yeah, because I mean, I feel like unless you're a super woke 14-year-old, I feel like you kind of just go on autopilot for, the first kind of like 20 years of your talking and interacting with human life. And then a lot of times it isn't until your mid-20s where you like kind of just like, well, of course you go to college, and of course you went to this college, and then you did this job. And then you're like, oh shoot, is this what, like, there's like what I want? And like even the concept that society shaped who you were supposed to be, is like this big concept that like up until that you're like, no, I do me. And then it's like, oh no, there's like other influence.
There is levels to this, and you don't even realize. And you're right. Like, our brains aren't even fully formed until 25. And it's like wild that, when we want to shift or evolve or do these things, people sort of clam up and you're like, what? I'm figuring it out in real time. How was I supposed to have all the answers?
Yeah. And I mean, it makes people so uncomfortable when they have to take you out of the box they've put you in.
They hate it. People hate that.
Why do you think that is? Is it because, I'll just let you, why do you think that is? Why do we struggle with people changing?
Here's one thing I think. So I do think that it is terrifying when someone around you gets free in a way that you're not. Because that forces you to now confront like your own self. And we hate that, right? People don't like that. So if me and you are friends for 20 years and I'm like, I can always count on you, girl, to be with me in this. And okay, I'll use a small example because this literally just happened. Everyone is like drinking too much in quarantine because we're in quarantine. And so Sammy and I were like, should we do like a Whole30? Like,
have you done it before?
Yes, we've done it before and we felt great. We've never done it in quarantine, obviously. But we were like, maybe we do a Whole30 light. Like maybe we only drink on weekends. Like, I mean, it's been like a whole thing. Because at the end of the day, you're like, if I don't have to look forward to a cocktail, what am I looking forward to? What am I doing here? Yeah. So anyways, we're our two best friends who we see all the time, and they're the best. And we were like, we're going to do Whole30. We think we're going to like not drink this month. And their first response is like, like,
how it affects them.
Right. Because it's like, we all know we've been drinking too much. And if we say we're going to take a break, and that forces you to confront whether or not you feel like you've been drinking too much in quarantine and you don't want to deal with that, it would be easier if we all just kept doing what we were doing. So on a small level, we understand it. And then so when it gets to an even bigger level of like, I have built my whole life around these ideas. They have become comfortable, even if they're not working. even if I have those things in me that like I should confront, but I'm just pushing down, when I see someone around me confront them, I want to stop them because that will reflect on me.
Yeah.
Right. And that's like, I always say we cannot carry the weight of that because that is not
carry
your
other people's
issue.
shit. Like that's your goats, your rodeo. And I can't carry that.
And try as you might to put it on me, I can't.
Right.
Like, I'm not gonna.
Okay. So you write this book. Sounds amazing. I have a feeling that when you were writing this and planning what a book tour was going to look like, 2020, you did not, I'm anticipating you did not have insider knowledge that 2020 was going to happen.
Oh gosh.
Has there been, what's the like silver lining blessing that has come out of releasing a book in the middle of a pandemic?
Well, I mean, first things first, more people are buying books than usual.
Oh.
I don't know if it's because they said I'm going to pretend to read more because I'm in quarantine, or if people actually are. Who knows, right? But books have actually been doing well on a practical level. But I think the other thing is, and this is an Enneagram 7 moment, I have had so many feelings. I've had so many feelings around releasing this book that I for sure would have busied myself out of if I could have. Mm-hmm. So right now, if I could have been prepping for, okay, book tour, we have these cities. Do we have the interviewers in each city? Do we have lights? What's it going to sound like? Do we have a guest speaker? Do we have all the pens? Do we have all the books? Are they getting there? Does the publisher know? Like, I could do all of that and avoid like the moments where I really just sat and cried. Like, I actually don't know if I care. If I hope people love this book and I hope it touches them. But I got to a place recently where I just cried and I was like, I'm just honored that I got to write it. And I feel so happy about that. And I would have never gotten there if I could have been busier.
Yep. If you would have just busied yourself. But you did pick up running in quarantine, I see.
I did. I'm a runner. I'm a whole runner.
Yep. So you're training for a half marathon or full?
A half marathon.
Okay. So I only run half marathons. I don't do full. Everyone goes like, oh, just wait. When are you planning for the full? And I have never, ever been, there's this point at the half, because most halves have a full also, where it's like you're at like mile 12.5. And there's a split because it's like, okay, half marathoners, the finish line is right there. Hey, full marathoners, you're going to go, you're halfway. There's
you're going to do it again.
Single point in my life that I've gone, gosh, I just really wish I was turning right and going with just only halfway at this point. No.
I don't think I have it in me. I'm like 26. Like, that's just so much time. I don't know. I mean, God bless them.
But running, why I asked about it is because, I mean, it's just you and your thoughts. And that's probably been a really great place for it because you can't multitask. You can't busy yourself. And it's like you process that stuff. I can't say how many times I've come back from a run and I'm like, I have an idea. Like, because it's just clear slate.
Literally. I mean, I have been shocked at what is in my brain that I didn't give space to. And running has been phenomenal. I'll try to challenge myself not every run. Most runs I listen to music, but like maybe one a week or something where I'm like, just turn it off for at least half the run or something and just see what pops in your brain. And a lot of times music will help sort of spark some ideas, but it has been so great. And, we're in quarantine and there's like the ever present fear of getting sick mixed with, the ever present fear of like racist America. And so mixed with like emotions of a book. So it has been my saving grace, truly.
Yeah, I definitely hear that. Okay, so you touched on it. We're recording on July 3rd, and tomorrow's the 4th of July. And because I stalk you, I saw that. So what I'm asking here is I saw that you have been celebrating Juneteenth for years, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, such a stupid, or not stupid, I won't try and judge myself, such a like late to the party white girl moment of like, I thought this was like a new holiday. I didn't know this was for years. So how do you look at 4th of July? Can you see like, yeah, America, you're doing some good work this year, or do you struggle with all of just the years and years and decades, or do you just really love fireworks?
Yeah. I've always thought of like Juneteenth is our 4th of July. That's the day that feels like celebrating, family, friends, sort of all the things that I think white Americans probably feel about 4th of July. 4th of July has always been like problematic to me. It's nice to have a day off, and it's nice to, if a friend has a boat, like, and who doesn't love a backyard barbecue? But I don't feel it's hard to, I'll put this year in the context. And by the way, this year is unique in that we are having these conversations about racism in America very publicly and openly, but this year is not different in terms of the amount of racism we're experiencing, right? So this year, for example, I'm like, you want to tell me that the to be real, the cops who murdered Breonna Taylor are still cops, and you want me to celebrate freedom? Like, it's not going to happen. I'm not going to get down with it. Like, you want to tell me that we have, I mean, this, and for what it's worth, we need to reexamine so many things. And I think people sometimes feel defensive. Like, this is like this country, it's
so defensive.
And I'm like, were you in the room, in Philadelphia? Did you sign that thing? Like, if not, like, there's no reason to feel that attached to it. Like, I'm like, what is
you created?
Yeah. Like, are you John Hancock? Like, what is happening? Like, why do you feel so strongly about this? And that we can't like acknowledge, like, this is not working actually for everyone. It may have been working for you, and that's why you feel so tied to it, but it hasn't been working for everyone. And so we need a redo. We need some qualifications. And so it's like,
I feel like so many conversations around racism get completely sidetracked by misunderstanding and not being on the same page as far as like definition of words. Like, I was going to talk to my dad and I said the word white privilege, and you can just imagine the classic response of like defensiveness that elicits. And then we get sidetracked of like, no, let me like explain that, like, what this means. And, we just have this where I feel like white people jump to this idea that like, I'm a good person, so therefore racism can't exist in me, and I have to make sure I defend that. Otherwise, I might be a bad person, and I have to, kind of like we were talking about before, I might have to reflect on my identity. And therefore, if I know I'm a good person and I go to this church and I'm a part of this community can't be systemic racism. So like, how do you, because all of those are sidetracked, right? Like all of those are pulling away from like the point, like the actual conversation that happens. So how do you do you have any tips for like jumping over or like walking through that quickly of like, yes, 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 yes. I know this, you know, like,
yeah.
Does that question make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I think so. So what I always say is racism is an individual. That's what we're talking about. Because if it is, you get to say, I'm not racist, and now you're out of the conversation, which, whatever. But we're talking about a system and a structure that has, by the way, impacted everyone. When I say we need to talk about racism in America, when I say we need justice in America, I don't mean that just means for Black people. That means we need healing and freedom for everyone, right? Mm-hmm. We have all been impacted very differently, but we are existing in this system. And so white people who are like, I'm a good person, I want to be a good person. Yes. And you know what's making that harder for you? Systemic racism. Mm-hmm. So help us dismantle it. And then we all get to live into the people we want to be. But it's a long conversation. And I have, I don't know this, but I have a course.
I bought it.
That we put, oh, great.
That river analogy, and it totally like right away in the beginning you have this river analogy where it's like, oh, okay, picture sitting by the thing, and I'm like, okay, I'm picturing it, and then it's like trash, and I'm like, oh no, trash. And like as a 3, I want to take action like really quickly, and so it's like, well, what do you do? Jump in the river? And I'm like, I just like pictured myself like, yeah, that's what I'll do.
Like,
and then
all
I'm like,
the trash.
Go uphill. I'm like, yep. Okay, I see what you're doing, and I can see where I can get busy just picking up the trash in front of me.
I know, and it takes work, but that's what I'm saying is like we can't get mad at it. We have to get rid of that defensiveness, and no one is saying, hey, you're the worst kind of person in the world, and I just want you to know that, right? We're saying, hey, you being a part of this country, you being here has put you on this moving sidewalk, has put you on this path, and I don't think it's the one you want to be on. So can you help us turn it around, right? Can you take some action steps? Because right, we all want to be free, and that's not what it looks like. And you know, people always. The Declaration of Independence. Okay, let's just have a moment about it.
We see the soapbox and we're going to step on it for a
second. Let's just do it. And here's the interesting thing is people are like, we need to make that true, or we need to, all men are created equal or whatever. And I'm like, the writers who wrote that, who said all men are created equal, and they were talking about their experience in America, they were being honest. And that was true. Because for them, Black men were not men. They were 3/5. Women were not men. People who didn't own land weren't considered men. And so, yeah, it was a true statement that all men were created equal in their eyes. And that meant white, male landowners. Mm-hmm. And they believed that. And that was their qualification. So I think we need a full re-understanding of, okay, let's not talk about how do we make this document true. It's like, it was true. It was very true for them. That's not the question. The question is, what new documents do we need that will be true for everyone, right? I mean, if no women, no people of color, there were like 7 people in a room, wrote something down, like it may need a touch up and it may need some updates. And I don't know why someone wrote down, like if there was if I remember, a chiropractor?
Yep.
Yes. If someone wrote a book of chiropractoring, chiropractic.
You adjusted. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yes. If someone wrote a book of chiropractic in 1776, and then you went to school in 2020 and they were like, here's everything you need to know about how to be a chiropractor.
Don't worry.
We don't need to change this. They wrote it. It was perfect. Like you would be messing up people's backs. Like that's just.
Well, and so what's interesting is, do you think, because around that time is also a time where I don't remember when like the Pope, do you know when like the Pope was declared infallible? Like it wasn't forever.
Oh my gosh, I don't know. Yeah.
Like, it was like 17, Kirby would know, he reads all that stuff. But like, that was a newish thing as like, you know, people started to learn and like science started happening and it was like, hold on, we need to make some things like infallible. So it was like the Bible can never be changed. And so I wonder how much of that same feeling around like, no, we can't question because we don't question the Bible. We wouldn't make updates to the Bible.
Wouldn't dare
add books in that we chose not to put in.
We would never circle back and ask why.
No, because then the whole thing would explode. So I wonder how much of that same feeling of fear of like, if we start talking or editing or adding or removing, does the whole system or foundation is maybe a better like explode? Does everyone start questioning?
Yeah. And what a fragile system, right? But what you're talking about is like, I mean, Christian, American, white, like those things got braided together and then we slept on that braid for like 400 years and now we can't even tell the difference. But what a fragile system if we cannot, like, and this is what someone asked me recently, like about my faith and my spirituality now. And I'm like, I am obsessed. And because everything feels less fragile, because I walked through most of my spiritual life kind of afraid that if I looked behind like this certain curtain or lifted up this certain rock, like it was going to be like, God doesn't exist, hurry, put it down. And I'm like, oh no, you know, like there was that fear that it was so fragile, right? And now that it's opened up and I'm realizing the story just is meant to get bigger and it can get as big as God. And that is as big as you can get. So every new thing, I'm like, bring it on. And my dad says something that always like messes me up. My dad's the best, most brilliant guy. But he was like, white supremacy and Christianity and these things, they only require believers, not thinkers. So to function, they only require believers, not thinkers. And it's so troubling, right? Because you see it. You just need to believe America is the greatest nation that ever was. You don't need to think critically about it.
And we don't want you to think.
We don't. And we're going to set it all up.
Like you're not required. It's like, actually, we would prefer if you didn't.
Yeah. Like we're going to work around and with the church, right? And again, I don't just want to shit on the church.
No, that's got to be hard.
People in there and there's whatever. But at the same time, we have set it up, the evangelical church in America, set it up in a structure to remove the thinking, to say, this book is infallible. And yes, you have access to it. But as a pastor, I'll go ahead and read it and I'll tell you what it says. And if you want to know more of what it says, just come back every week and I'll do the heavy lifting. Right. Mm-hmm. And we have said the same thing, right, in our country with our government of like, I read the Declaration, I know the laws, police officers, lawyers, that let them do the heavy lifting and you just enjoy this great place. And so I think, I always say, I think the one thing that we need that can change the world truly is critical thinking. Right?
Yeah. So do you think that with religion coming into everything right now, do you think the traditional model of just come back on next Sunday, I will do the heavy lifting for you, I will interpret for you, because you showed up, you automatically get your good little Christian, good person badge. Mm-hmm. There will be a place for you. Do you think that's contributed to the complacency about things like race and the LGBTQ rights? Because people can feel like good people, even if they didn't take action for justice. Absolutely.
It's, and people get to feel like they are neutral. Which is what we talk about all the time. There's no neutral. There is no neutral. Like if you are not for something, you're moving against something, there is no neutral. And so much of church and parts of our society have made it feel like you can be neutral. You can be in this, you can you can straddle the fence for the rest of your life and find the right, like, and this is what kills me about like church sometimes, is they just have these like answers that don't say anything, but they're talking. And you're like, what's happening? I asked you a question in a language we both speak, and yet I have no idea what you just said. And so people get to feel like I'm just a person. I'm just a person who goes here, and I don't have the responsibility that the pastor has, and I don't have the responsibility that our government has, and I don't have these responsibilities. So then I actually don't have to do anything, right? Because that's what we teach at church is like, we'll take the responsibility. We'll read, we'll pray, we'll get close enough to God so that we could just tell you what God wants for your life, and you don't have to carry that weight, you know.
Mm-hmm. That neutrality that you touched on, I would say is probably the number one thing that has blown up in my life since George Floyd and all of this. So like, I am not a person of color. I am straight. And so specifically with, we kind of have, Kirby and I have like, I don't want to call it like a personal crisis or anything like this, but we live in a really small town where there's not a lot of variation of non-denomination. And so we go to a church, it's got a really great like band, and they like, it's cool. It's a cool church. And it's a denomination. It's Wesleyan. And so we've kind of, and I don't know how much you know, but like there have been sermons over the last few years that we've gone that are very not in alignment with our thinking on being gay. But, they only do it like once a year, and we just kind of like zone out and go on Instagram that day, like we're not going to like stand up and leave. And like, what other church would we go to? We don't have many options. And so we've been able to sit in this comfort of like, well, we're not gay. We don't really know what the answer is. We don't have to decide whether it's okay. And we can just keep going to this church that we like, even though they've kind of decided what the answer is. And then I didn't even see it coming. So that was like pre-George Floyd.
Yeah.
Then this happened, and like, I love it that it has awoken so much of a yearning for learning, and like, okay, I'm late to the party. I'm here to work. Like, what do you need me to do? I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to like make this about me, but like, I'm just going to learn and try and help. And it's removed that neutrality of like, like, oh shoot, before it was like, oh shoot, well that sucks, but like, I'm not Black. So like, hopefully it gets figured out.
Hopefully someone does something about that.
Hopefully.
Right. Yeah.
Shoot. That's terrible.
Yeah.
So how do you, I know this is like in your racism 101, but like, how does someone like me move forward? Like I said, I'm learning. First of all, can we go to the church thing specifically, and then we can talk about the racism? Like, do we need to leave? Because like, I am all about actions, and my actions now speak louder than my words. And so it's like, but we go to this church.
Yeah. Hopefully this doesn't sound cryptic, and I'm just quoting my dad again, but he always said, the first time I had like a team of people that I supervised, and he always said, the best time to fire someone is the first time you think about it.
Oof.
And he said that because he's like, there's a bunch of people who, people on your team might make a mistake, or you'll have tension, but it will never cross your mind like, oh, I need to fire this person, right? Like you navigate and you figure some out hard conversations. He said, but when the best time to fire someone is the first time you think about it. Which means for you, if you're asking the question, you know the answer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's hard and what I think keeps me staying is I don't believe that God cares where I go to church.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you said it in your prayer. Well, okay, I shouldn't say that. I'm sure there's some really weird churches out there that like, no. But like, if I'm asking the question of like, God, like, my heart, but is it okay that I show up here? Like, he's just like, God, Lauryn, I'm everywhere. Like, like you're worried about this one thing of whether you go to this one or that one. And like, and so that keeps me there. So it's not so much about my relationship with God. It's my relationship with, my friends who are gay. And like, if I have to, explain, if I have to explain, they're like, where do you go to church? And I go, oh, I go here. And they're like, oh, what denomination is that? And I'm like, it's Wesleyan. And I feel like I instantly have to start defending. And it's like, you might have your head.
And that's the thing is you're right. I don't think God cares where you go to church. I don't think God cares if you go to church. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not talking about like we're not hurting God's feelings and we're not trying to negotiate our lives based on am I hurting God's feelings or not? Or is God upset with me? Or is God happy with me? Or does God like this thing that I'm doing? Or is God like this thing? In my opinion, right? And this is my opinion. I think God has created this system in which we are meant to bring those things that were exemplified in the life of Jesus to our own reality. And those things that were exemplified in the life of Jesus did not have anything to do with pleasing or displeasing God. They had everything to do with bringing healing and wholeness and justice and peace to the communities around them. And so if your church experience, you feel like is not doing that, right? Then the question isn't, does God care about this? Because God, I don't think does. I think God would care about what does your life look like in the communities around you in terms of bringing healing, wholeness, transformation, justice, right? These things that, again, we're so exemplified by the life of Jesus. And that's where, again, people, and to no fault of their own, because that's exactly how we're taught, but that's how we get like sort of this paralysis of analysis. Mm-hmm. And we get wrapped up in like, what does God think about this? Right. And the answer is probably nothing.
And that's so hard for like, that just blew a bunch of people's mind of like, how can you say that? He thinks about every action I do.
Like, right. Like, I mean, I went to a Christian college and there's a very similar Christian college, like 40 miles away from it. And I just remember thinking like, I have to pick the right, like there's God has put
and a wrong one.
Yes. And one of them puts me quote unquote in the will of God. And one of them puts me out. And if I make that wrong decision and oh my God, when the reality is like, I don't think God cares where I went to college. If I went to college, my grades in college, if I graduated, if I didn't, I hope God cares about my student loans because Jesus, But what does my life actually look like? And is that having an impact anywhere around me? Is that literally creating opportunities of transformation, healing, wholeness, maturity, freedom? Like, is it like, I don't, even in the stories of Jesus and you can say God perfectly orchestrated every single step that Jesus, like, I don't know. We have the story of the Good Samaritan because that's the road Jesus happened to walk down. If Jesus would have gone left, we would have a story maybe about something else. Mm-hmm. But everywhere Jesus went, he was going to be about that work. So, you know what I mean? Like, use your life about it or not. And I think we have to stop negotiating with like, is this going to please or displease a petty God I have in my mind?
Yeah, I get that. And then how do you apply that, what you just said, mm-hmm. to moving forward in like taking action in race and like being an ally and all that?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's layers.
Yeah, that's an understatement.
Yeah.
It's a little complicated. Is that what you're saying?
It's a little complicated. And I have a love-hate relationship like most people do, I think, with social media. Mm. I love it for the accessibility that we have to each other. Twitter has revolutionized the way we see news, right? You can't have a newscaster now saying, this is what's happening. And then someone saying, actually, here's a video in real time. And this is what's happening. Now we have that power, and it's beautiful. And then there are parts of it that I don't like. And one of those things is because being an ally, jumping in, doing action, you're going to misstep.
Oh, yeah.
You just are. And I have misstepped, and I have the first chapter in my book, and this was really important to me. The first chapter is about all of the times I've gotten it wrong. Because I just want to set the stage for like, you will mess up, and I have, and I will again, and you will again. And can we be open to that being a learning process? And I think that has gotten harder with social media, because instead of me calling you and being like, hey girl, like I want to circle back to our conversation, and I feel like maybe this could have been said in a different way. Like, instead of that, it's like, Lauryn is the worst and she thinks she's not, and everybody comment. So that makes it tough.
The fear of the misstep is what I feel like just prevents so much action. Yes. Like, I was not unaware that we had major fucking issues in this country before George Floyd. This was finally where I was like, okay, I have to say something. Oh, but I'm going to get embarrassed. I'm going to say the wrong thing. Somebody's going to call me out, and then I'm just going to go, I'm sorry. You're right. I'll just shut up. So how, like, is it just being, I was listening to a podcast with Brit Barron, and she had Austin Channing Brown on, and Brene said, like, I'm out there talking about topics, all sorts of topics with like missteps.
And God bless her.
Yeah. And she goes like, and this has kind of been like my mantra since I heard it. She said like, I came here to get it right, not to be right. And so what I've been saying to like people who are like, I just don't want to like say the wrong thing. And it's like, okay, first of all, if this is what, like, if you're feeling encouraged to say something, do it, and don't let your shame, like that's like some negative dark energy trying to like spiritual espionage, trying to keep you from not stepping up into like truth and helping. But also you're putting yourself in a future where you get embarrassed, and that your only response is that you have to defend. Yep. And so like, it took so much weight off my shoulders when I realized that, okay, future, I can get called out. I can choose not to be embarrassed and just learn and go, oh, okay, please tell me. And like, I can remove that ego, and then it just allows this lightness to like help mess up and be like, yeah, you're going to mess up.
Exactly. And the thing is to connect our conversations, right? The way we feel about God sometimes, and we say, I don't know how many times I did this in my life, right? I don't know what God wants me to do, so I'm going to do nothing until I know exactly this is what God is saying to me. I'm going to do nothing. And in a certain way, I feel like we have made our own ego God, right? Of we are, our fear of upsetting it, our fear of hurting its feelings, our fear of those things with our own ego said like, well, if I don't know that it's going to be absolutely exactly right, I'm not going to do it.
Yep.
Right. And it's like, what? Come on, and you're exactly right. Like you decide whether or not you feel embarrassed or shame, or you let that stop you, or you feel like a failure. Or I had a friend text me yesterday, and used an acronym like that I obviously should have known. And I was like, hey, I'm going to be honest, I have no idea what this means. Tell me more, right? And then he was like, what? And I was like, what? I'm just going to be honest, I don't know what that means. It was like, if it's like, and now I know. And look at that. And I'm still standing, and I'm okay, and I'm fine. And so I think you just need to know, like, it's not going to be right, and it's not going to be perfect. And if you're getting in this work because you want gold stars and pats on the back, that's probably not going to happen. but you are more than welcome to join this journey, right?
Yep. I love it.
Yeah.
I could talk to you for hours. Maybe one day when we can travel again.
I
you
know.
can come to Bon Iver's Eau Claire's Festival. It's just 45 minutes from here. More than likely.
That is on my bucket list.
Yeah, it'll happen. Okay, so you have probably another interview to get to. So tell people about the book, where they can get it, how they can pre-order.
Yes. The book is called Worth It by me, Brit Barron. You can get it honestly anywhere you get your books. So Barnes & Noble, if you want to support indie books, Amazon, obviously, if you want it very fast. And you can follow me on Instagram at Brit Barron or check me out at britbarron.com.
Awesome. Brit, thank you so much. I'm sorry that you had to wake up so early for Pacific time to do
my gosh, don't worry.
with no coffee. Go to Starbucks and get yourself a cappuccino. Start drinking.
I could talk forever. Now I remember why we sat out there at the hotel and I left. I was like, I could have talked to them forever.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's like, oh shit. Wow. All right.
What a great time.
Thank you so much. And I can't wait to read your book.
Yes. Okay. We'll talk soon.
Talk soon. Bye.